It's time for bed.
That's easy for you to say.
We can't sleep.
We need some cookies.
Hello, this is Bleep Bleep Bloop Bloop.
So, what brings you around after all these years and years and years and years?
I had a run-in with Satan, and as a result, he took away all my powers and made me a mortal man again.
His was not the only evil presence in this city, for amongst the mortals there was a group who practiced secret, dark deeds.
You can live on pills, live at the bottom of the sea, go to the moon. You can talk to your friend and see them at the same time on a visiphone.
Well, it's always nice to hear from old friends.
There's the reassuring illusion of freedom in choosing our material needs, which are packaged and sold to us by experts. Experts in not only providing for our wants, but also in creating new ones as well.
I'm beginning to understand what it's like to be alone. Completely alone. I try as much as possible to go out only at night. Then I stay away from places where I might be spotted. If I know Braddock, he won't give up. The only thing that keeps me going is knowing that sooner or later he's gonna die. Then maybe you and I can start another life together. Somewhere.
You deal? Not anymore.
What the hell is the world coming to?
You have been instructed to remain silent and not ask questions. The duration of the trip is 2.5 hours. Under no circumstances are you to remove the blindfold until instructed to do so.
Welcome back. This is the third episode of Bleep Bleep Bloop Bloop. So you know now that I'm in it for the long haul. Even though I'm talking over myself, my tongue's tied all the time. In a minute, I'm going to give you some ASMR. Mini electronic duckbill plier clicking sound. Okay. And there's a diagram. Actually, it's a combined diagram. I found these separately online, and I could tell the styles seemed extraordinarily similar. I didn't see them together anywhere. When you're looking for example good solder joint, example bad solder joint images, these are not the first to turn up, but you find them. I used to think that they've been drawn by Forrest Mims because he is well known for his hand-drawn diagrams, but the style is not exactly the same. But you can tell how old these. You can guess these must be quite old because they're hand-lettered and hand-drawn, and they look as though they've been mimeographed, and mimeographs of mimeographs made before they were scanned. Anyway, the good solder joint on the left, clean, bright, shiny, concave fillet, complete wetting, means the surface. If you're looking vertically, there's no copper exposed around the pin. Okay, at the right, the bad joint. Okay, it's got spikes. It's frosty, outgassing little pits in it, little tiny pits. Pregnant, lean, too concave. There's some sign of remelt, like a vertical lip around it, like a hem. There's balls, and it's not completely wetted the copper. Okay, now this we're jumping on. So these are 2 ethanol dispensers I've been using. The reason I put the sponge there, silicone sponge, to try to show you how blue the liquid is. That's supposed to be pure ethanol, but obviously it's not because pure ethanol, doesn't react with copper. Okay, but this has. So it's a Hosan brand dispenser. It's nice, except that it came with that dumb cap, the plastic cap, which you have to really squeeze on there. Whenever you squeeze it on there, you feel like you're going to flip the whole bottle. So what happened? What turned it blue? Okay, I'm going to show you. There are either copper or brass fittings in this thing. At the bottom there, in the intake, see, it's some spots are extremely blue, and other spots not so much blue. But that's either, I think it's brass or it could be copper. But ethanol, as I said, doesn't react with copper. In a minute, I'll show you there's more copper in the top. It doesn't react with copper, but ethanol is hygroscopic. I use pure ethanol, by the way, but it's hygroscopic, Hygroscopic, which means that it tends to absorb water. So even water vapor in the air over time accumulates, I guess. So I don't know what's the purity of that ethanol. I have no idea, but it's now there's copper in solution. So now that's why it's got a blue color. I'm showing you the box that came in. Big disappointment, really. This still works perfectly, and I think for most situations it doesn't really matter if I have a very fine layer of copper, whatever the copper ions are. Okay, this one just broke. Nothing turned blue. That's all was fine. I used it till it was used up. But there's a tiny little retaining clip, like a little piece of wire separate from the spring, and that busted, and then after that the pump mechanism no longer works. In a minute I'm going to go back. I'll show you the other piece of copper that's in the other brand one. Yeah, this is MTK brand, also a lab supplies brand. Yeah, this one says anti-static. You got me. I don't know. There. Okay. See that? There's copper there, but a little bit of copper, but it didn't corrode. It didn't turn all the ethanol blue. The copper's only in the top, and I guess there's not enough backwash because it didn't have that effect. But whereas in the other manufacturer's ethanol dispenser, there's a big lump of brass or something at the very bottom. It's fully immersed in the ethanol continuously. So that's what happened there. A big disappointment. Anyway, but by the time you're watching this, I've already gone into the storeroom area, and I've already fished out replacements of a little bit different design. Although I can tell you now, one of those, one of them also has a similar problem. There's copper somewhere that's immersed in the ethanol because it's already turned blue. But the weird thing was, the yellow cap bottle there, the ethanol didn't turn blue for months and months and months. The bottle started out full. Whenever I'd use it, I would slide that cap off, and I would dispense it onto a Kim wipe or onto a paper towel or something, and do whatever I had to do. And then immediately, before I even used the alcohol-soaked pad or Kim wipe, I would press that yellow plastic lid back on there. But for some reason, after months of use, overnight it turned blue. Something happened. It was very abrupt. It wasn't a gradual thing. I'm playing with the parts of the one that didn't turn blue. Yeah, that's the ring. That thing I'm holding there, that's whatever it was. That's the part that failed. Yeah, and I play with the fittings a little bit more. Yeah, I'm going to toss that. There's no point trying to repair it. I could waste time trying to fix it. It's not good content, I'd say, in my point of view. Anyway, so what have I got for you? So what I've got today is soldering practice, like in the first video, but a little bit different because I'm going to be using leaded solder for part of it. So first it would be unleaded solder and then leaded solder. And if you feel like it, you can pause, you can go back to the part of the video that showed it was illustration of two solder joints, one good, one bad, one acceptable, one unacceptable. That drawing, I think, was made for an era where leaded solder was pretty much all that was in use. Okay, because what they call frosty or something, they have it's like cross hatch pattern on the illustration of the bad joint. That is pretty much how lead-free solder looks. You can get the shape of the joint right. You can get a concave fillet. You can get full wetting of the copper trace or the copper pad, no problem. But the surface will not be perfectly smooth and shiny. I just showed that squeeze bottle. That's what I've been using. That's what I used after those two bottles kind of failed, and before I went and dug around in the kind of the supplies area and got out a new bottle. There's a squeeze bottle of distilled water. I'm wetting the sponge. The sponge is not dried out, so you can tell I've been soldering lately anyway. So I want to read you something, and it's going to be it's a balancing act here, okay? Because there's audio that comes with the video you're watching, right? This audio that was recorded at the time of me working at a workbench, okay? Puttering around, working, same, you know. Anyway, then in a minute there's going to be inset video. You're going to see it pop up in the lower left part of the screen. That is, I have resized large format video recorded by one of the microscope cameras. It's the one at an angle. That's it. That's one I use a lot for this video. Okay, and then later if I show you bits of I may talk about a movie. I may show you bits of a film. If I do, that'll be another inset clip somewhere on the screen. All right. Okay. You like Orwell? That's an Orwell quote. But while we're going around, I want to read you something funny. So when I record these videos, I'm not thinking only of people of the current day. That's why I've so far tried to avoid, and I will continue to try to avoid talking about very current events or news, or especially politics or something like that. It's my hope is that these will be viewed or listened to by people. It could be 5, 10, 20, 500, 1,000, like in the AI movie with the Macaulay Culkin replacement. The boy who's an android, they dig him out of the ice and then they turn him back on, something like that. I hope that these recordings also endure, they persist. So I saw something funny when I was looking around for messages to the future. So I'm going to read you something. I didn't write this, okay? When I start, I say begin quote, then I'm reading something, and by end quote, I finish reading it. Begin quote. What message would you send to someone living 50 years in the future? First off, I want to say hello to all of the cyborgs, mermaids, humanoids, aliens, and microbes that are thriving and ruling 50 years from now. Beep, boop, beep. That's from, not me. It's from the one I'm reading. Greetings from the dystopian hellscape that is the year 2020 in the United States during the coronavirus pandemic. Is podcasting still a thing? Is eugenics and inequality still around? Do disabled people still exist in your timeline? I really hope so, although I imagine how we think and talk about disability has progressed for the better. So, end quote. So where is that from? That is from one of the messages in a post on a blog called flashforwardpod.com. And it's an interesting post, and the blog is interesting. It's a futurist blog, a podcast blog, I think. And the passage I just read aloud to you was written by Alice Wong. She was a disabled persons or a differently able persons activist. And she was writing in 2020 during the COVID how to explain it, episode of history. You know, it was a pandemic. Humanity is always living in a period of pandemics. There are multiple pandemics running continuously. Some, when one stops, another one may have already begun, and there's more than one going on at once. Where you could say we're in a constant, never-ending flu pandemic, or an RSV pandemic, a herpes pandemic, an HIV pandemic. I mean, the list is endless. There's no end. Okay. But anyway, COVID had a lot of a mind share and a lot of attention, and not organically. You know, it was promoted heavily, but we won't get into that. Anyway, that woman was writing in 2020, and it's interesting the way she reaches out to cyborgs, mermaids, humanoids, aliens, and microbes. I guess intelligent, cognitively comparable to humans, microbes, maybe colonies of microbes that somehow host a human level intelligence. I don't know. It's interesting, but unfortunately, that's quite interesting. There's more to it. I didn't read the entire part that she wrote for it, but she has since passed. So I looked her up, and that lady, Alice Wong, as I said, her name was. She was born in 1974, and she passed, God rest her soul, in 2025. And she had a genetic illness called spinal muscular atrophy. It's a neuromuscular thing, and according to Wikipedia, she lost the ability to walk at around 7 or 8 years old. Her parents were Hong Kong immigrants to the United States, and she was raised in suburban Indiana. Very sad that she passed. She seems to have been a wonderful person, and it's not good to speak ill of the dead, but I did think that part was interesting, that part of her message. It's one of a number of messages on the same page. The theme was, what would you say to people living 50 years in the future? And it was in 2020, so a lot of the replies somehow touch upon or concern or are preoccupied with COVID, the coronavirus issue from 2020 to, it went on to 2021, 2022. Sorry, I got the hiccups. Anyway, quite interesting. And it got me on to thinking about passing messages to the future and how it's kind of selective, kind of interesting, the way people look at it. Oh, by the way, I'm now back to, I'm going to comment on the video a little bit here. I'm putting in header pins. I tried to put them in the wrong way. Yeah, the long part of the pin goes into the solderless breadboard. And that solderless breadboard, by the way, keep your eye on that. It won't survive this episode intact. I can't remember if it fragments during this half or in the paid or AKA bonus half, but it doesn't survive. But just so you know, that I've been using that solderless breadboard for a very long time. So it had been subjected to heat and cooling cycles from soldering many times. I didn't destroy it just in the course of making this particular video. It was already, it's long in the tooth, or not long for this world, as one would say. I'm using different color, the plastic, I don't know, what do you call that? The plastic material that spans the header pins? I don't know. The whole thing I'd call a row of header pins, and I've broken them into 4 pin segments, and I'm putting them in alternate color order. And I've got blue, I've got red, and I've got a kind of a smoker's tooth or ivory white color. There's not really white. It's not gleaming bleach, pure white. But we use what we can get our hands on, right? Okay, so there's going to be 2 proto boards there, the 2 red proto boards, and one will be done with unleaded solder, lead-free solder, and one will be done with leaded solder. And the inset video is going to pop up relatively soon, in a second here. I would say abracadabra, but I don't want to take a chance on it. No, not yet, but any second now. So back to the topic. I was talking about how the idea of sending messages to the future when you don't know what people are going to be doing or how things are going to be going, what that's like. And it reminded me of if you Google this phrase, you'll see what I'm talking about. But wait, can I show? Here we go. There we go. See, that inside video popped up. In the lower left corner of your screen, you should be able to see it now. Okay, I'm putting the first proto board, I'm putting it onto the header pins, which are in turn inserted into the solderless breadboard. Okay, so as I was saying, it got me thinking, if you Google this phrase, you search for this phrase online, this is not a place of honor, or this place is not a place of honor. The phrase stuck in my head, and that's what I used to find the material again when I was looking for it online. So they call it was people refer to nuclear semiotics. So the idea was that the United States federal government was arranging, they were going to construct a long-term storage facility for nuclear waste, and not gloves that had been contaminated with medical grade isotopes or something but rather like spent fuel rods that weren't going to be, they should, I guess that couldn't be, or nobody's running a breeder reactor they couldn't reuse. So spent fuel rods and like long-term radioactive waste that supposedly would be still dangerous for thousands of years, okay? And they were going to put it in some barren region of the desert in the western part of the United States on federal land. And the concern was that, climate does change. Maybe not for the reasons people would say, and maybe they're ignoring many of the obvious reasons and they're focusing on things that are relatively insignificant. But climate does change, and that area has been wet and fertile in the past. It could be wet and fertile again in the future. The water table could rise, and so on and so forth. Civilizations could crumble. New civilizations could rise, like Thundar the Barbarian situation. And there was the concern that our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren may dig into this facility and break the seals on if the seals had even endured, break the seals on the nuclear material there, and then release it and pollute, contaminate their surroundings in that future era, and things like that. So the United States, the Department of Energy or something, or the federal government, they invited science fiction writers and anthropologists and sociologists and historians and so on and so forth, and linguists to try to devise some system for warning far future people who may not even speak English in that time, and maybe English is passed down, maybe not speak Spanish. They may speak Esperanto, or they may speak binary, boop, beep, boop, 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 or something. Who knows, okay? So the idea was to try to make some semi-foolproof unmistakable system for warning people that whatever's there, don't mess with it. It's very dangerous, and if you mess with it, you're on your own. Something like that. So I remember I read about that effort, the project. I think it was in 1980s, and they started this. The facility is I haven't checked on it, so I may be wrong. But my understanding is the facility still is not used, or it's not being used to capacity or the way it's supposed to be, the volume is supposed to be, because there's still concerns about safety for long term, and maybe earthquakes or something crazy. So they still, even after all that, and they eventually did settle on a scheme. And scheme was not one of the wilder ones that were under discussion when they began, but they eventually settled on a scheme, and I think they're putting up the warning. They've already put up the warning systems and something like that, but they're not even using the facility to its full capacity because of other, hysterical, environmental, hand-wringing issues, okay? But if you look it up, let me see. Okay, so you can go to Wikipedia, look for long-term, hyphenated, long-term nuclear waste warning messages. So I'm skimming it now. I've read it before. Okay, so yeah, nuclear. I'll read the first paragraph. It's a short one. Long-term nuclear waste warning messages are communication attempts intended to deter human intrusion at nuclear waste repositories in the far future, within or above the order of magnitude of 10,000 years. Nuclear semiotics is an interdisciplinary field of research that aims to study and design optimal signage techniques and messages for this purpose. It was first established by the American Human Interference Task Force in 1981. And the Human Interference Task Force phrase, that's a link also, and that takes you somewhere else. And they had a 1993 report, and I can't remember, I read in books. They had different signs and symbols. And that, I remember one, the idea was that they would make kind of like weird claw-shaped stone sculptures that would look very menacing, and they would cover the surface of the earth over this facility with these crazy giant, jagged-looking, spiky things like weird claws. But then the idea was like, well, even if the tips broke off, because some they'd be angled outwards at nearly horizontally and so on, and people worried that over time they would deteriorate and break. Well, even if they broke, it'd still obviously be like a messed up area, and people would get the idea or something like that. In the end, they didn't go with that. They went with something that was probably cheaper, other forms of markers with messages written in different languages and things like that. But it's very interesting, really. You could read the article. They have some famous, fruity, psycho, crazy science fiction writer, communist people, including like Stanislaw Lem, the Polish, I think he's a Polish science fiction author. He put a proposal in there. It's interesting stuff. The actual plan that they came up with is relatively mild and kind of boring by comparison. But the funny thing is, if you're listening to this and you're an American, or even if you're not an American, you may be aware. If you are an American and are not aware of this, or you are not an American and are not aware, either way, if you're not aware, period, you could look around, Google, you could look, or search somewhere. We can do image search for images posted online, wherever or whatever the internet of your era is. You may be listening to this 10,000 years from now. You may need bleep, bleep, bloop, bloop, semiotics to help understand this podcast or something. Anyway, look online for pictures of Superfund site warning sign. So some Superfund sites, Superfund is the United States Environmental Protection Agency program for long-term cleaning, try to clean and remediate the soil and the groundwater in former industrial or military or government sites that have become hazardous due to leaks or poor disposal or poor storage of chemicals or substances or materials, or to the way the waste products were disposed of at the time, okay? Some of these places have been basically no man's lands for decades already, and in some cases they're regarded as like hopeless. There's no way to really make the site safe, okay? And no one would ever want to live there or drink water if you drilled a well there or something like that. But the signs, these are dangerous places, okay? Maybe not for 50,000 years, but they're still dangerous places. But the signs are relatively tame. It's just like a white enameled metal sign on a chain link fence. And it may say something like, I'm looking at some now. For example, EPA, Superfund site in little letters, and then warning in red. Warning, hazardous materials present at this site, no trespassing. And then for further information, blah, 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 something like that. Or some of the other signs. One of them is like, it has the trefoil, the three, it's the circle in the middle, and then the three arcs radiating out, and it says caution, and then at the bottom, radioactive materials, because there's some radioactive stuff there. It's funny. The warnings they're not so scary, right? These are dangerous sites, but nobody's putting massive walls. It's just a rusty chain link fence. If you're lucky, the gate may have the gate latch may have rusted through. You may be able to just walk in, and there's nobody guarding it or defending it. And there are warning signs in 50 languages and hieroglyphics and all this kind of stuff. It's funny to me. And then what else I got? So that's kind of thing. Really, it kind of gets to me. And also, setting aside, forget Superfund, okay? Depending what anything I'm saying, you can search and you can confirm that I'm basically correct, okay? So one of the top staple food crops in the world is rice, okay? Rice is semi-aquatic. It's grown in water, like the stereotypical idea of like a rice paddy. So it's grown in very marshy, watery ground, okay? And how to explain this? For example, around the world, you can look up, search online, look for maps of something like arsenic, naturally occurring arsenic soil contamination, okay? And you can see on global maps, if you look in your country, then maybe you're lucky your country has no naturally occurring arsenic contamination that would be in the soil or the groundwater. But like for example, in the United States, I know that there are some in like the southern central part of the United States, and there are some areas in like what is California. It means the groundwater itself. If you drill down, you get the pure, clean, beautiful water. There's some amount of arsenic in the water. Okay, so the groundwater is in many cases used for irrigation. Okay, also in the past, herbicides and pesticides that have been used for agriculture, some of those in the past were arsenic based. So they also contain arsenic. And it just so happens that in many parts of the world, for these two combined reasons, there is naturally occurring arsenic in some areas, okay? You have to test the water to see if you have that problem or not. And then in other places where agriculture has been done for decades and decades and decades, in the past, arsenic-based chemicals were sprayed everywhere or applied. Okay, and I've told you that rice is grown semi-aquatically in flooded fields. Okay, so imagine if you're irrigating with groundwater and the groundwater has arsenic, or arsenic had been applied to these areas in the past. Maybe they weren't rice fields in the past. Maybe they're cotton fields. It doesn't mean it wasn't only used on rice fields. These arsenic compounds, they were used on any kind of agricultural area, and the water keeps the soil basically, they would say the water mobilizes things that are in the soil. So if there's arsenic in the soil, either from past irrigation or because of groundwater, or because of it was applied for pest control or weed control, then there's going to be arsenic in the water. And rice is a plant that exhibits what we call bioaccumulation. So it accumulates arsenic for arsenic. So some plants, like sunflowers and other certain plants, say that you have a site like a polluted site, and it has some for some finite period there was some release of some unwanted material, some kind of like heavy metal or something that no one wants. Some compound containing this is breaking down, but the ground is not safe. You don't want to eat anything from there. In some situations, that the authorities may, or some groups trying to rehabilitate the area, they may use what's called phytoremediation. Phyto, like plant, P-H-Y-T-O, phytoremediation. They may grow a crop there, like sunflowers or something. But the sunflowers would not be for consumption, because maybe not the seeds so much, but other parts of the plant, or maybe also the seeds, you have to check in the details, they would concentrate this undesirable material, this maybe a heavy metal or something else, in their flesh. So the idea would be you would grow multiple crops until you had sucked enough whatever the unwanted material was, suck it out of the soil. It would be in the plant tissue, and then you would harvest the plant tissue and you would get rid of it. You move it somewhere else. The problem wouldn't be fixed. The plants, when they decompose, would release the material. So you'd have to put the plants into a landfill or something, and the landfill presumably would be on even less desirable land, something that would be less useful to people, and you wouldn't care about the wildlife there. But okay, so that's phytoremediation. Rice is not being grown for phytoremediation. Rice is being grown for human consumption, but the rice plants do the same thing. So if you consume a lot of rice, for example, you should be checking the rice to see if it's got a lot of arsenic in it. But hey, you don't have to listen to me. It's up to you. Anyway, so where are we on the video here? Okay, I can see I'm about halfway through soldering this proto board. This is just practice. I just like to do it, and I got lots of solder. I got spools and spools of solder, different alloys. I'm not constrained. It's not coming out of my wallet so much. Okay, they're around. I can use them. Nobody cares. And a lot of the joints I make are not perfect because I want to work quickly. I want to see how I can do. And I didn't give the iron temperature, but it's appropriate for lead-free solder. And the alloy, I've got the label above the inset there, SAC 305 solder alloy. So what that means is it's mostly tin, and then it has copper and a little bit of silver. So it's mostly tin, a little bit of copper after that, and then a much smaller amount of silver. And it's flux core. It's like a single flux core, and I'm using a rosin-based flux that's no clean. That's in the core rather. And if you see me apply any more flux, I may have already done it. I wasn't watching the video I was playing, but if I have applied flux, it's either from a small bottle with a syringe tip, and it's rosin-based no clean flux, or it's from kind of a maybe like a shoe polish shaped container, like a disc shape, like a shallow, wide, round, with a big. Okay, I can see it. That's the one I'm talking about. It's like a yellowish gummy one, very gooey. It looks like jam or something. That also is no clean and rosin-based flux. Okay, but that one I think it's a little bit better. It's messier to work with, and it leaves more residue if you want to clean that you would have to clean because it's sticky. You don't have to clean it. Theoretically, to say you don't have to clean, it won't affect the joint and won't affect the operation of the circuit if you're doing a circuit, but it is gross and sticky. The clear one with the syringe tip bottle, that one is less yucky, less gunky. Okay, but the yellowish jam marmalade colored one in the little puck shaped container, that one it feels like in my subjective view it works better. You get better joints with it. All right. So some of these I'll go back and rework. I may have already reworked some of them while the video's been going. And if you have a very good eagle eye, you can probably see some of the joints are substandard. They're not great joints. So part of the problem I think is sometimes if I'm not careful, when I'm using the soldering iron, you apply the soldering iron tip to the pin and to the trace, the copper ring around there. I can't remember the word for it. Yeah, but sometimes I apply it from an angle, so I get the bottom of the pin hot, and I get the the copper ring. I get that hot, but I don't get the pin hot all the way up. So that then when I bring the end of the solder wire spool in there, and I'm pressing it there to melt the solder, when I'm working like that, and I got that soldering iron tip at an angle, I'm not getting the whole pin hot. I should really have the tip of the iron more vertical, so it's pressing against the pin from where it emerges through the hole in the protoboard all the way up. That would be better. When I do that, I get better results. I get the solder kind of wicks more. It runs more vertically up the pin. and I get better results. I'm saying this as like a note to myself. You listening to this are probably an expert solderer, and your solder joints all turn out beautiful and perfect. Okay, but see what I'm saying about frosty? Before I was saying that lead-free solder often looked frosty. That's you see these, and when they're hot, they just apply there. It's very shiny, right? But then when I pull away the cool, they get that frosty appearance. It's like someone on a winter day, you're exhaling hot breath onto a glass surface or something, and it gets foggy. It's a similar appearance. Yeah. Okay, so what's next? I'm almost done that proto board. The next proto board is going to be a it's going to be leaded solder. But you'll see when I pull another spool up. I think I already showed you the lead-free spool. I'll pull the red spool. It's red plastic. That's their way of warning you. And it's lead solder, but it's also multi-core. It's interesting. But that's coming up. And so when I prepare for these videos, I spend some time. I make a lot of notes. So let me think. I'll just between you and me. Don't tell anybody else. Okay, this is my technique. I've got a PDF I've made of notes about particular things and screen caps of things, and they've been annotated. Then I've got a clipboard, a large clipboard with a big old piece of graph paper kind of taped to it, because otherwise I flap around. And I got a lot of notes. It's kind of like in conspiracy theory movies. You got the guy, the conspiracy theorist, with his hair all wacky and pulling his hair out, and his big he's got the Sanpaku eyes because he's so stressed out about what he's discovered. He's got a wall, and he's got a big cork board on the wall, and there's push pins, and there's yarn in between the push pins connecting them or something. I don't have that. I have a big piece of graph paper with notes written on the graph paper. I have arrows. I use black ink pen, and then also some spots I use blue or red ink. You know, there's a lot of interesting stuff. Interesting to me. I think I'd like to share with you. So, for example, talking about films I've watched lately. Talking about things that bother me. Speaking of things that bother me, this is not on. Actually, this is just off the top of my head. It's not on that board. Actually, you know about UAP. You probably heard the term UAP, unidentified. I think it stands for aerial phenomena for plural, phenomenon singular. It used to be called UFO, unidentified flying object or objects, but they've renamed it because it's really when they TM trademark there, the they, capital THEY, when they want to reuse some old disinfo or psyop or something, they change the name to give it like a more fresh feeling. Okay, so something that's been in my mind lately of the UAP stuff. So you kind of dig it out. Try to find it here. It came up recently. Okay, so I don't know if you remember, okay, but back in 2017, all right, there was an article in the New York Times, and I'm looking at it now. I had it on my screen so I could mention it to you guys. Glowing auras and then this is in single quotes, black money, close single quote, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program. And the part that I wanted to mention was the guy, Bigelow. Okay, so okay, I'm reading now. I'm quoting from this New York Times article. You can look it up. I've given you the title. It's from 2017. You can find it. The shadowy program, parts of it remain classified, began in 2007, and initially it was largely funded at the request of Harry Reid, the Nevada Democrat who was the Senate Majority Leader at the time, and who has long had an interest in space phenomena. Most of the money went to an aerospace research company run by a billionaire entrepreneur and longtime friend of Mr. Reid's, Robert Bigelow, who is currently working with NASA to produce expandable craft for humans to use in space. Expandable craft, they were inflatable. Okay, I don't know, did anything ever come of it? Besides prototype, maybe they deployed a test model one time, miniature. I don't know, but as far as I know, in 2025, no one's living in inflatable HABs in orbit, okay, around the Earth. Anyway, on CBS's 60 Minutes in May, so that would have been May, whenever this 2017, I guess, Mr. Bigelow said he was, quote, absolutely convinced, unquote, that aliens exist and that UFOs have visited Earth. So blah 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 blah. Let's try to find this. Wait a minute. Ugh. Oh, there. Okay. I had to scroll a little bit more. More. Okay. So this is like 2/3 of the way through the paper, the article rather. The funding. This quote. The funding went to Mr. Bigelow's company, Bigelow Aerospace, which hired some contractors and solicited research for the program. And this was the part that's interesting. Under Mr. Bigelow's direction, the company modified buildings in Las Vegas for the storage of metal alloys and other materials that Mr. Elizondo, as another UFO guy, and program contractors said had been recovered from unidentified aerial phenomena. And blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that's the part I cared about. The idea was that Mr. Bigelow, male gigolo, no, just Mr. Bigelow, the aerospace tycoon there, that he had modified some kind of warehouse facility that he owned in Las Vegas to store materials purportedly recovered from UFOs. They call them UAPs, but they mean UFOs, like exotic materials, strange, otherworldly materials. Okay, so that article, when it came out, it stuck in my mind, and I was waiting to see whether anything else would come forth from that, whether there would be any news later. So that article, December 16th, 2017, New York Times, 3 people involved, Helen Cooper, Ralph Blumenthal, and Leslie Keene. In New York Times, glowing auras and black money, the Pentagon's mysterious UFO program. So in the back of my mind, I'd had that going for a while, okay? And then I just thought, wait a minute, whatever came of that? So I hunted around and I found an interview. The interview is broken up into 2 parts. Maybe it's also been uploaded in one solid length, but the part that I saw was 2 parts, okay? And it was, I think, George Knapp, Knapp. He was the interviewer, the interlocutor, talking to Mr. Bigelow. And I looked at it was in February 2021 that this interview was conducted, and it's uploaded. I'm looking at part 2 video, okay? And at about 19 minutes in, Mr. Knapp, the interviewer, I guess is Knapp, he asked him point blank, do you have any of these machinery, or these devices or something like that? And Bigelow answers no. They never got any. So the 2017 article says that they're modifying storage facilities so that they could safely hold these otherworldly relics or artifacts or materials. And finally, it seemed like no one had asked him this until 2021. Had he ever gotten any of these materials? Had anyone ever delivered any, and they ever been stored in anything? He ever touched them, laid hands on them, or personally laid eyes on them? No. The answer is no. It's kind of funny. So I don't know. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, smash that like button on this video if there's a like button wherever you're watching it, on whatever service, whatever time, whatever era of history. But or leave a comment if it's within my lifetime and I see it. I may reply. Okay. I don't know. Are you a big believer in UAPs? You believe that UAPs are real and that they represent some sort of incursion or exploration or attempt at contact or maybe attempt at surreptitious studying of humanity by extraterrestrial intelligences or robots from the past or robots from the future or ancient civilizations, Atlanteans or something, or trans-dimensional entities, or do you think that they're angels or demons or whatever? Drop a comment in. Lay it on me, man. I want to hear. Personally, I think that it's a big fat nothing. I think that when there are mysterious, weird things going on, I believe that they are either a natural phenomena or they are maybe foreign or domestic American in private or government vehicles or devices, machinery or something. I don't think it's aliens. I think that it's a cover story. It's kind of like, I don't know if you can look into this. You can search online or look through a library, try to find materials. When I was a young, very, very young sprout, I even then I loved science and engineering. and I would scour any library to which I was given access for books on anything about the future, robots, space, other planets, dinosaurs, science, technology, for my entire childhood, up until the point I went to university. And I got too busy to scour libraries for a while. And one of the things I would read about, it would be books about, or chapters in other books about how in the future human beings were going to be living on floating cities on the ocean, or we're going to be living in underwater cities on the seafloor, or there would be large-scale seafloor mining operations. Basically, it was about the manganese nodules, and those are real. Manganese nodules are real, and they form in some way similar to how a pearl forms in an oyster, where there's some original nucleus, nucleating material, maybe like a shark tooth or some fragment of something, and minerals adhere onto it, and then it's a process where more and more minerals, as a crust forms, and then it eventually becomes a semi-spherical nodule, and they're real. They come in different sizes, just the same way that a pearl, if you find a grain of sand gets inside of a oyster shell, and it's rough and it's abrading the tissue of the oyster living inside the shell, so it secretes the material that builds up and becomes a pearl as a form of defense. Like a callus, like a way that humans would have a callus on your hand. If you always applying pressure or friction to one part of your hand, you get a callus there, or your foot. Likewise, same thing. So manganese nodules are real, okay? But the idea that there's going to be in the near future large-scale harvesting of manganese nodules from the seafloor is kind of like ridiculous. At the time, it came out later. The books I was reading as a child were much older. They were from the 60s and 70s. And there's like the Jacques Cousteau era of science and people's relationship to the ocean and ocean exploration. But what was really going on was there was a lot of military activity involved on the seafloor. Maybe tapping other countries' undersea cables, or looking for devices or installations that may have been placed on the seafloor or on the coastline around. So there was a need to explain why people were fiddling around the ocean floor, and the idea was like looking for manganese nodules or going to the Titanic, things like that, and exploring the wreck, which they did also, but just that it gave the excuse to develop the technology you would need and the vehicles you would need and the support systems you would need for that kind of stuff, to tap undersea cables or to snoop for mines or watch for submarines or things like that, or to install underwater microphones to try to listen for motor sounds from submarines and so on and so forth. Yeah. So I think it's like that with UAPs. It's just a cover. All right, so let's look back at the video we got going here. I'm using that instrument. It's nice. It's convenient. It's flat handled, fits well in the hand, and it's got a curved kind of pointer. So I'm pointing out, that one, that joint, that's pregnant. That's the example of a bad joint is pregnant. It's not a concave fillet. A lot of the pregnant, but a pregnant joint will still work. It's not great, but it will work. And see, it's that one we'd say frosty. Look at that. It looks like an orange, like the skin of an orange, but that it really has. I assure you, it's the texture of the surface is pretty much unavoidable with the SAC 305 alloy, and it's not because it's old and expired, which it is, by the way. But that's not the reason. It's just like that. There's not much you can do. Later, when I use leaded solder for the second proto board, the joints end up much shinier, and generally end up better. Leaded solder is just simply it's easier to work with, as anyone will tell you, and I'm sure you already know. You don't need me to say it, okay? But it's just easier to work with. Oh, that joint just there, that wasn't bad, but that was the problem I was talking about with I don't heat up the whole pin, so the solder doesn't climb up, it doesn't creep up all the way up the pin like it should. Yeah, in times past, I would have thought that was a good joint until I got some that were better, where the solder really went, it crawled up the entire pin. Yeah, a little bit of a. Yeah, I'm using a handheld LED fill light. So that fill light, it doesn't have it doesn't do the strobing, the flashing that sometimes you see from the microscope light. because that's made, the one I'm using is intended to be used by photographers. Okay. The microscope LED ring around the microscope, both of them have that problem, by the way. The vertical microscope and the one that I've been using for the inset video there, that's at a bit of an angled, they both have that problem with their light, the pulse width modulation, because they both have dimmer functions. But maybe even if they didn't have dimmer functions, they would have used PWM to control the brightness somehow, or to step down the voltage or something, so it would still be strobing. But the handheld light there is nice, but it gets a little bit warm in your hands and it runs the battery down pretty quickly, you know. But I've since I made this video in late November, you know, sorry, shameful confession, it took me a long time to sit down and get the audio going. Since I made that video, I've acquired what they call like a cold light, they say. It's basically a halogen bulb and a housing with a fan to keep that cool, and then the one I've gotten, I dug it out. It has 2 stalks, flexible, repositionable stalks with fiber optic cable inside, and then it emits the light at the end, and it's very focused. You can get them right up to where you're working. Hopefully, in a future video or videos, you'll see that in use. You just see the stalks, probably. Okay, here I'm applying more flux. I want to rework some of these joints, I think. Yes. So so we've covered the Bigelow Aerospace alien artifact storage non-story. It turned out to be nothing. What else? We covered the interesting warnings around the idea of warnings for 10,000-year future unknown civilizations about nuclear waste storage, and how nobody bothers to replicate that for Superfund sites. It's just a chain link fence with, if you're lucky, some rusty sign, if you can read it. It's, you know. And we also mentioned that there's an issue with food crops like rice being contaminated with arsenic because of where they're being grown and how they're being grown. And basically nobody's testing for that. Nobody cares. So everyday people being dosed with arsenic, which is not good for you, especially if you have a diet. The rice finds its way into a lot of materials. The rice is ground, made of rice flour, used for noodles and things like that. The rice is also used as to give texture and bulk to other foods. So if processed foods may have rice, they may include rice, and that would have, if it has arsenic in the rice, it would also be in the processed food. And it might be when you consume the food, you don't even know that it contains rice. So it's an issue, but nobody cares, and there's certainly no one's making giant pillars with warnings in 50,000 languages telling you to please take your rice, take a couple grains and go have them tested for arsenic, you know? So it's kind of a wacky time in which we live, in which I live. You may be one of those 10 people living 10,000 years in the future with a jetpack, or you may be living on Mars or living under the ocean or something, or living on the moon. I couldn't say. I hope you're living on the moon. That'd be cool. I grew up, by the way, I don't think you'll be living on the moon. Even if you're 10,000 years in the future, I think you'll probably be still stuck on Earth, like as we are now. But hey, and that's for another time. Okay, so I'm looking back at the video. I reworked some joints. Now I'm looking at them again under the microscope. I'm looking at them under the vertical microscope. You can't see it, but I am able to view a screen that shows the feeds from both soldering microscopes at the same time. It's mounted out of view. So if I'm holding something there and you don't see it on the inset, that's okay. Oh, at the side of this breadboard is going to fall apart. You can see I'm holding at different angles. You can see the effect. The wells and the plastic of the surface of the side of this breadboard is all messed up, and you see cracks. You see it's fractured. It's in bad shape. But as I said, it's not from this one time. You may think it is, just because all the fractures seem to be in the half of the breadboard that I've been using. It may seem that all the damage was done this time, but let me assure you, it was not. It's a long-suffering side of this breadboard. Okay, so let me think. What else? I'm looking at my big board here. So in the comments, if you want, you can leave a comment. Tell me what you've been reading lately. So I'm an eclectic reader. I have a number of books that I'm working on. semi-simultaneously. For example, at the moment, I'm working my way slowly through the collected essays of George Orwell. The quote I showed you earlier in the video, if you spotted it, that wasn't from one of the essays. That's a separate quote. It's interesting. And in addition to that, I'm also reading the multi-volume biography of Ray Bradbury by Eller, Eller. That's his surname. He's at, I think, the University of Indiana. It's a coincidence. The lady I told you about earlier, who had the neuromuscular disorder, who has since passed, who was an activist, she also, I think, she grew up in Indiana. But when she passed, she was in California. But I think Eller now he's an emeritus professor at the Indiana University, I believe, where they have the Center for Ray Bradbury. Well, he wrote a 3-volume literary biography of Ray Bradbury. It's fascinating, really. And you can dip in to any of the books. You can flip pages at random with your eyes closed and stick your hand in, and then look at what you've held open. That page. There'll be something fascinating, really. Bradbury, to me, is one of those rare authors who, when you look at them clearly in retrospect, you don't find anything really terribly unsavory about their lives. Nobody's perfect. We're all fallible human beings. We're all basically animals, and everyone does things they regret, I'm sure. And Bradbury, I'm sure, did. But there's nothing that stands out where you're like, whoa, this guy is a little bit creepy. The worst thing I could think that there's not even bad, really, given the context and the time and that he was involved in. And not in the Eller biography, because that's a literary biography, but in the Bradbury Chronicles, it's by a different author, Sam Weller. I have that as well. I've read that. I'm also doing a reread. I've set it aside for a while, but I'd been rereading it before, and especially his youth. Bradbury lost a lot of people. A lot of people passed who were close to him, family members. It's quite sad. But when I was talking about maybe faux pas or personal, a little bit less than stellar behavior, not really terrible, but I think he was smooching with a female cousin. He was practicing kissing when he was just barely like a tween or something. It's not that bad. It's not terrible. They didn't fornicate, and they didn't have a child or anything crazy. And then after he moved to, if I remember correctly, after he moved to Los Angeles, he was more of a teenager then. I think he and a friend kind of saved up a few bucks, and they went and got themselves serviced by a sex worker, we would say. And the funny part I remember about that was that he in his account, Ray Bradbury related this to Sam Weller in interviews that then Sam Weller pulled together and then edited and made into the biography. Ray Bradbury said that the prostitute gave him a bath first. Like, he makes it sound as though she bathed him. I think that's how it's described. But as far as I know, it's the one and only time he consorted with a sex worker. But it's relatively mild. Okay, in the video, I'm looking at the video now. I can see I'm inserting pins. I've flipped the solderless breadboard to the less obviously damaged side, and I'm putting, again, blue, white, and red 4-pin segments of header pin into there. And then I'm going to put another probe board. This time it's going to be leaded solder. So you'll see me. I'll flash the solder spool that I'm going to use. I'll try to get it so the camera can focus and you can see the labeling. The last one, what was the name of the company? I can't remember. This one's going to be Henkel, aka Loctite. But I think it's since been sold to somebody else, the solder alloy operation anyway. But this one's going to be Henkel leaded solder on a red spool, and it's multi-core. It's got, if I remember right, 5 teardrop-shaped cores of rosin-based flux. But anyway, we'll get to that. So I've been reading the Orwell book and also the Eller biography, multi-volume, just dipping into that. And the interesting thing about, well, there's a lot of interesting things, but one of the interesting things about the first couple of essays, so I don't know if you know, Orwell died of tuberculosis. I think everyone, they'll tell you that in Wikipedia or wherever, or his biography. But when I've seen anyone describe how he got tuberculosis, the view is put forth because he was tested repeatedly, periodically, because tuberculosis was a widespread illness, and whenever anyone had lung problems, and Orwell at the time, he was a smoker, but also he said he had weak lungs. He seems like he often had respiratory problems, like chest colds or pneumonia, or whatever they would call it, flu or sinusitis or something. So he would get checked out, and he kept testing negative for tuberculosis until like a year and a half before he died. Oh, there's a spool. Okay, that one's I barely used it because there's a little bit of trepidation on my part about using a lot of lead-based solder. Even with I have the solder fume extractor running the whole time, because of the noise in the background, I may actually mute or knock down the volume on the video, the main video for this, and it may be just my monologuing here. So Orwell died of tuberculosis, and he only got a positive test result about a year and a half before he actually died of it. And he tried antibiotics that were effective for tuberculosis at the time. They had just become available. If I remember correctly, he had them almost smuggled in from the United States. He had to use book royalties from American sales to buy them and send them. The antibiotics were available in England, but not to him. He wasn't a queen or a king or whatever. So he got them shipped in from America, and I guess he got a local doctor to administer them. But he had an allergic reaction or some kind of a negative reaction to the antibiotic itself, and he had to discontinue treatment with that antibiotic. And I think he got other antibiotics after that, but they weren't for the tuberculosis. They were for other infections, secondary infections. And he died of tuberculosis. But it's my contention that he acquired the tuberculosis not in the Spanish Civil War, but years earlier when he was in Paris, because he mentions being ill, and this is in. So why am I mentioning this? I'm mentioning this because I've been reading the Orwell essays, and one of the first essays is I think it's called The Spike. It's about when he went into a workhouse temporarily. So he would go on like homeless trekking expeditions where he pretended to be a vagabond or something, like a homeless bum, like a hobo type. And at that time, England or maybe the UK in general had systems of workhouses, and there were people who resided in the workhouses permanently, and they did sort of like semi-skilled, or they had like a little bit more trained type of labor they were doing. And then there were the casual section of the workhouse, and they called that casual section the Spike because of the types of labor that were performed there and the tools they used. I found this Orwell just mentions, he calls it the Spike and talks about other things like not being able to bring cigarettes and anything like that, but he doesn't get into why they call it the Spike. I found this out elsewhere. They called it the Spike because you had to use something like a tool that had a spike to either separate tar infused old used rope, separate it into what's the name for that stuff? It's the packing material they used to put in between wood planks in a ship hull, and they would add more tar onto it to seal it. Oakum, O-A-K-U-M, oakum. They would separate the rope and like separate it into fiber, and that would be turned into oakum later. And oakum, I encountered it very briefly, and I didn't fully understand what it was. It was still being used for some people who had like old cast iron pipes, especially maybe like flue pipes for exhaust or something for like combustion gases in their homes or something. In old times, any gaps would have been stuffed with oakum and then sealed with tar or something like that, even back then. And that since was replaced by asbestos, and then later replaced by other stuff that's much safer than asbestos. Anyway, so this one type of spike work, the reason they call it spike was they would use a spiked tool to separate the strands of like nautical rope into bits that would be turned into oakum. And the other thing is spike would mean like some kind of a pickaxe. They would break big rocks into little rocks, and it had an axe, so you'll call it the spike also. So he spent some time roaming like a semi-homeless person. But when he was in Paris, it wasn't semi-homeless period, but he got sick and he went to a charity hospital. He didn't know it was a charity hospital. He was taken to the nearest hospital. And the guy in the bed nearest him, if you read that essay, it's published later. I can't remember the name of it. It was published a decade and a half after. It's like much later. But it was written much earlier than that. It was written at that time when it actually occurred. This event occurred in his life. The person in the bed next to him was coughing up blood. And he was in that hospital for days. And the person was coughing up blood. They did what they call cupping. So they used flame inside of a glass bottle to burn the air out, suck the air out, and then he applied it to his skin to raise like a welt or raise like a bump. And then they would scratch that with like a scalpel or some kind of scoring tool or some cutting tool, and they would repeat the procedure and suck blood out. And he said in that essay about being in the hospital that they had used the same exact tools without cleaning or sterilizing on him when he first arrived, the first night he got there, as on the person who had been coughing up blood. Oh wait, I think. Almost time for the outro audio, but they, without sterilizing, use the same tools, and you can get tuberculosis through the blood. It's not usually how people get it, because who would share a dirty needle with a tuberculosis patient, right? You summon, but I think that's how Orwell got it. But people don't really understand that. I think that happened in like 1929 or something like that. You have to check the dates. Okay, outro music coming on. I'll see you in the bonus half. Please like, subscribe, comment, and go to the Patreon.